there's sacrifice. We have to sacrifice. I mean, there's going to be sacrifice for us to make it through this desert. And one of the things we're going to have to do, is small churches are going to have to sort of give up that personal. They'll have to sacrifice a little bit of that minister is our pastor, our friend thing. You will have to now, but you might have to do that anyway if your church starts to decline and that minister moves from a 3/4 time down to a half to a quarter. You're going to lose it anyway in 15 years. So it's short-sighted to think, oh, we can keep this forever. The other thing I would say is theologically, large churches have lost that. Large and mid-size and mid-large have lost that years ago because the minister functions as a coach to create lay teams of lay pastors to do that, and also develop small group programs where the small group programs take care of each other. So I would just argue that one of the best discernment things is a small congregation that's wrestling with that real pain. And I don't want to minimize it. That's family church. That was a beautiful thing. It's wonderful there was a time in our history, only about 50 years, where we had it. Let's remember that, but there's other ways we can have that intimacy than just through that minister. And the discernment to get over that pain and struggle would be maybe that your board or your leaders need to visit a mid-size or large church and talk about how they still feel, that they have that intimacy, just not with the minister, but with other folks. And then the last thing I'll say is distance. I just came from the Pacific West, and they ate me alive on this. They're like, look, dude, you just came from New England. New England has 5 Unitarian churches like a stone's throw. They have to turn down their mics because they can hear each other preach. This is ridiculous. Did you know? Have you been to the West? I mean, do you know that we're states apart? You're in Wyoming, dude. There's only one of us here, and the other one's in. And I said, well, let's be clear. We are Unitarian Universalists. So all the strategies we're Unitarian Universalists. Proud to be Unitarian, we're very distinctive. But we are also in the stream of liberal religion. And we know in this day and age that it matters for us to partner with our brother and sister religious liberals. So every strategy that I'm bringing up now can be, you may not have a UU congregation in your town, but I guarantee you've got a UCC. I guarantee you've got a liberal Jewish community. I guarantee you've got, even in some of your towns, Buddha. I could keep going. That there's liberal groups, and what we know is when you look at conservative on liberal, and you put the conservative end of all religions at the bottom, and the liberal end. So if you line up all religions at the bottom, every aspect of a religion that's conservative, they are different. They have radical. The more conservative you are, the more they're distinct, and you can't bond. But when you go to the top, what happens at the top of every religion, the liberals of every religion almost share the same theology. And I would argue that there is a singular, at the liberal end of all religions, we almost share a theology, not just views. And think about a lot of stuff we say, science, contextual stuff. Think of all our values. Those are shared. We share a common theology. So it wouldn't be that hard to do these yoking models and these interdependent models with another person in your community. And I guarantee you, they're struggling with the same thing. And, oh my God, talk about a new day. Or, I'm an atheist, but God calling us to something new? Nothing would make me more happy. First of all, I would like 40 UU networks in another 3 years. But nothing would make me happier if we had 40 new UU networks and 20 interfaith networks. Talk about us being a new, and isn't that what we want? That would be great. Sorry I went on a sermon.
I just wanted to throw out a question or a Tayler in support of what you're doing. I grew up in congregation in Hollis, Queens, and we had a local congregation in Flushing that was fairly close to us. And at the time that I was growing up, Hollis was a much larger church than a much larger congregation in Flushing. And there were a number of proposals, I remember when I was a kid at the time, but I remember that people proposed the congregation was doing some things in collaboration with each other, finding ways to share resources. And they never could get to the point of doing it. And now it must be going on about 10 years ago, I was invited to a service at Hollis, which we closed the congregation and gave all the resources of the congregation to Flushing to try to continue their mission in Queens, but the church closed, and I don't think that's an unusual scenario really, and Hollis was the thriving one. We were the ones that were doing really well and had more people and more resources, and then we learned, and you don't hear the waterfall coming.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It may take 3 years, but this is a culture change, and what we need is our best professional and lay leaders to do culture change. And so some of it starts, remember in my talk, I threw out this piece. I would love it if all of you threw out your 5-year plans tomorrow and made first priority your 5-year strategic plan among your cluster. Once you've done that, then you can get on to your other work. But that's part of that culture change, right? If you don't have a vision of where we're all going together, how we all, and think about that, to write a 5-year strategic plan or a 5-year covenant, or covenant for 5 years among 3 or 4 congregations, you've just suddenly shifted your whole mindset from how we are serving the people within our walls to how we together are serving this community. Just that mind shift, I mean, think about what that would, do to us. When we look at the many types of web work, again, what I want to say is, as we go through this list, any one of these, if you just did one, A+. That's good enough, okay? And you can also see these as baby steps towards the bigger. And I would argue, you must see these as required baby steps. It took me 3 years of developing relationships with Canandaigua before we actually merged. So we got on themes together for years before the thing happened. They got to know me before, we did all this, we did immigration work together. So there's a lot of this, to see this as, these are required. It will not work to jump whole hog in. Now, some of these steps can be done in a year. I mean, I'm not saying take 8 years to do it. Some can be done in a year, some can be done in 2. So that's the intro to this. So let's start going through some of what I see are the exciting web work stuff going around. So theme church sharing circles and related resource sharing. So what we have now are about 3 what we're calling theme-based sharing circles that have emerged up around the country. They exist from 20 congregations in the network to 40 to the one that I'm a part of, which is up to 95 congregations. So these groups of congregations, to be in a theme-based sharing circle just means they all agree to be on the same worship themes. And I just explained what worship themes are, okay? Now, let me qualify that a little bit, because when you join a sharing circle, of the 90, for instance, I don't want to overstate it, the 90 that are in the Soul Matters sharing circle that we're a part of, about 30% of them actually go back to the archives of material and create their own themes. But the others, and some of the others might only use 6 or 7 out of the 10, but still, almost 40% of those congregations are on the same worship themes. Now, across the country, what that allows is a whole bunch of economies of scale. So when we're talking about, remember this, where do we find capacity? We find it from within and in between. This is an in-between strategy that isn't even with your neighbor. Right. This is a national, so even if you're in Wyoming, and you can join this national network, and what does that do? If you're a solo part-time minister, where you're writing a sermon, you're also having to write your curriculum for your small groups, that's exhausting. Any of the ministers or religious professionals in the room know that writing a monthly covenant group curriculum takes a good one takes almost as long as a sermon to do. So if you join the circle, you get it. You get the packet sent to you in the mail. All of a sudden, 30 to 40 hours of work capacity freed up for other things. So see, again, it's another capacity saving.
Is there a cost associated with joining?
Yes, okay. Yes, but money's not in it. So
yes.
Yeah. I mean, let me throw out the money just so you know, so you see how reasonable it is. So the big cost to begin is on a sliding scale. The first joining is $500 to $750. What that gets you is 6 years of material. After 6 years of small group material, and it gets you access to all the sharing documents where those ministers shared, where the RE people shared their RE material on that theme, and the ministers shared their sermons on that theme. So the archives are small group material, sermons, and RE material. Boom. in a package, right there. $500 to $750 is a pretty good deal with that. Renewal every year is $250, but that $250, again, $250 a year, you basically bought your director of member services for $250, not $15,000. So that's one piece of economies of scale, that sharing that you can do by just joining. Now, as much as I'm a big promoter of these national sharing circles, because I love the power of knowing that 100, not 100, I gotta remember, so it's out of the 100, 45 in any given month are all spiritually connected around the 40 congregations are all wrestling with the same theme. Powerful. Right? Now, as much as I love this, I really love the idea of clusters coming together and doing their own little sharing circle. So I dream of a day when maybe the cluster joins one of these bigger sharing networks to get access to the material, but then this cluster together, and by cluster, let's talk about 8 churches or even 2. Even if 2 churches did this, and so let's get on the same worship themes. That opens up avenues for your RE. You don't even have to share staff, but suddenly your 2 DREs can get together for coffee at the beginning of each month, and since you're on the same theme, hey, what are you doing on this? You know what I mean? All of a sudden you don't have to do it alone, and you can share material, save time, do stuff together. Cost savings, right? Cost saving capacity. Ministers, imagine being in a ministers group where you could get together. So is this, you see where this seems small, but it's huge. And again, it doesn't have to lead. It led, in my case, to multi-site, but it doesn't have to. It can just be ways that allow you to share. The last thing I'll say about this is it transforms even things like the relationship between congregations. So guest preaching, when many of us do guest preaching where the minister from one church comes over, let's be honest, most of those guest services are just Scott coming over to bring his best sermon just to show you how good of a preacher I am. Right? You didn't even I didn't try to pick a topic that even mattered to you. I was bringing my best sermon. But if they're on the same worship themes, I've seen it transform. So think about the difference of Scott coming over with a sermon on the theme that you've been wrestling with. All of a sudden, I'm a fellow journeyer, not a show-off. I'm overstating. I'm overstating, but I'm overstating and I probably should put more of the emphasis on the fellow traveler. Suddenly I'm contributing to a conversation. Suddenly you feel differently, not just about me, but I bring the spiritual searching that the other congregation was through that. So that it's not just about capacity, but it's also about the spiritual depth that changes. And then see where that blossoms. Suddenly when you start feeling like, oh my God, we're brother and sister congregations on the same spiritual journey, I think that changes your heart and your head. Yep. You just want to start doing social justice together easier. Think about your youth. If you're kids, all of a sudden, how many people do, and by the way, we have 8 of these, so we are going to be on track, I promise. Oh my God, my brain said, help me, when you go visit other, across... Neighboring face, right. If you're on the same themes, right, the way we did our neighboring face, it had to do with the themes. So you go to visit a different house of worship on that theme. Well, all of a sudden, if 2 churches on the same theme, why don't the 2 groups go together? Youth groups, why don't we go together? It just starts to bring people together more. So that one's huge, and I can get you more resources on how to sign up for these sharing circles if you would find that.